What up, what up? I'm back at it again with another video. Before I get started, you know what I'm gonna say. Please smash that like button, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. Today's video is kind of gonna be a bit of a rant. I want to talk about why I no longer care about being a good person anymore. So yeah, this sounds kind of like crazy, and it has me wondering, like, is this my villain origin story? Is this my Joker origin story? Maybe, I don't know. So as I've talked about on this channel, I grew up as a devout Christian, and even before I was a devout Christian, like, my parents are Christians, so I grew up in church and then eventually made that decision to be like very serious about it myself. That was a long time ago. That was about 9-10 years ago since when I left Christianity. But just because you leave a religion, or just because you're not part of a congregation anymore, doesn't necessarily mean that those ideals are not still a part of you. So a lot of the last 9-10 years have been me trying to unlearn this stuff that I grew up in, that I committed myself to, and it has been really frustrating to no longer be a part of that religion but still have these ideas inside of me that are actively harming me and causing me to cause harm to other people. It just got me thinking too, like, it's wild because when you talk about people who are disempowered in society, they are often tasked with being moral. Why are poor people tasked with being a good person? Why are poor people tasked with taking the high road? When they go low, we go high. No. That's bullshit. That is about maintaining power, and that is how you get manipulated, and that is how you get taken advantage of. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that when you encounter petty people, be petty with them, stay down in the mud with them all the time and keep these people in your life. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, like, oh yeah, if you recognize that somebody's petty, yeah, you could be petty too, you could go lower than they go, but don't keep that around you. Like, don't keep that dynamic going. Don't continuously participate in that relationship dynamic. That is unhealthy long term. But when people go low, I'm gonna go low too. When people go low, I'm gonna set a boundary. When people try to guilt me, I'm gonna set a boundary. When people hurt me, I might swing on them. But overall, I'm saying, like, I recognize that that relationship is not healthy. That relationship dynamic is not healthy. It's not working. My mind immediately comes back to enslaved people. Slaves here in America, forced to practice Christianity. It was seen as the deciding thing that made them separate from animals, even though they still weren't quite human. They were considered 3/5 of a human being. But morality was drilled into them. Oh, you have to be moral, and if you're not our kind of moral, if you practice this other stuff, that is like demonic, that is evil, that is wrong. You have to be our kind of moral, you have to be a Christian. And that is control. That was obviously used to control them, and the promise was that, oh, a good slave will inherit the kingdom of heaven, a good slave will see God one day. And that is really sick. That is really, really twisted and really sick. And even though people in this country are not technically enslaved, though many would argue that in prison you are actually enslaved, so prison industrial complex, I'm looking at you. Religion is still used to control the masses. Religion is still used to keep people in line. Religion is still used as like a moral compass for laws, and it has a lot more to do with power than it does have to do with actual morality. We've been new. This is nothing new, but I just needed to rant today, right? When it comes to right and wrong, it's obvious that capitalism is wrong. It's obvious that it's wrong to put people in cages. It's obvious that if communities had all of their needs met, there wouldn't be crimes. We know this stuff. We know that if we had resources, y'all know it. I'll link some stuff down below, but it's really like becoming very, very apparent to me that I was so concerned with being a good person, even though I wasn't a part of a religion anymore, and this idea of morality and follow things by the book, follow the law, even if the law is unjust. Like, it is used to literally maintain the status quo and keep power where it is. You know what I'm saying? And there was this fixation on being good and guilt. right? And when you are part of Christianity, or in my experience with Christianity, oftentimes it has a lot to do with guilt, and they call it conviction, but a lot of it is like emotional manipulation and guilt. And that is something that, even though I left the religion, that is something that I really, really struggled with. Also, I experienced it in spaces that were so-called safe spaces. If people sense that you care about being nice or being a good person, they will manipulate you, and they will not reciprocate what they are asking for from you. And that was my experience. That might not be your experience, but I think that it is so messed up that people do this. But you have to spot the signs. You have to recognize when people are trying to get over on you. And I wish that people didn't do stuff like that. I wish that everybody's needs were met. I wish that people weren't greedy. I wish that people weren't cruel. I also recognize that, like, yo, like, you have to keep yourself safe and be less worried about whether people consider you a nice person or a good person, and more about your material needs, more about community, more about self-respect, more about showing up for yourself, more about entering into fair relationships, entering into fair transactionals, entering into fair agreements, and not about being a good person, not about being a nice person. I don't know, like, this is definitely a message specifically that I need to hear, because my default is to be respectful. My default is to be kind. My default is to smile. My default is to be silly and goofy. And when that is your default, people will try to take advantage of you. This message of like, oh, I don't need to worry about being nice, that might not land with you, because some people's default might be to actually be kind of cruel or kind of mean. And the message that they might need is like, oh, like, treat everybody with respect and just try to be kind to everybody. That is not the message that I need, because that's already my default. If I hear that, that's kind of me like stepping a little too far. Yeah, this is just kind of like stuff that's going through my mind the more I'm reading about abolition and power, and also like relationships too, like outside of like politicals. I mean, the personal is the political, right? But like even outside of that, it's just like, bro, like when you are so worried about being a good person, when you are so worried about that, when you are so worried about maintaining this idea that you even have of yourself, this story that you keep telling yourself, no, I'm a good person, I'm kind, I'm nice. And especially when you come from like a background like me, a religious background, where you're no longer religious and people will try to demonize you. So then you might feel like, oh, I need to prove that I am a good person even though I'm not part of this religion. And so like for me, that was what it was. So that's kind of why I wanted to say this and just give you context as to like where this message is coming from and who this message is coming from. Thank you for letting me rant. I just needed to let that off my chest. The more I'm learning, it's like there are certain things that kind of starting to feel like it's piling up against me. Like I'm now tasked with being this virtuous, righteous person who takes everybody's shit and just like, oh no, I'm not gonna do that back to them because that's wrong. I'm gonna go around and create this new way of being. Well, that's the goal, to get out of this dynamic. But I'm talking about right now. What's happening right now? What's happening right now is that somebody's invading my personal boundaries. Knock if you buck. So yeah. If you made it this far, please leave me some hearts down below. And if you would like to help me out in any way, my Cash App and my Venmo is right down below in the description box. I will see you next time. Peace.